When I was young, life was simple and sweet, like a dream I never wanted to wake up from. During those days, I didn't have to know what worry tasted like, didn't face the pressures of daily needs, and never had to think about the uncertain future ahead. I was born into a wealthy family where my father was the head, the man who could provide everything a child could imagine. Money was never a problem. With just a word, anything I wanted would appear before me. I didn't study much, had no motivation or pressure to strive. The advice from friends like, plan for your future, seemed like distant stories, and I just smiled and ignored them. Why should I worry? My father has money, and his wealth will always guarantee my life. I didn't understand why people rushed into work, made careful plans, stayed up late studying, or worked tirelessly. All I knew was that whenever I wanted a new pair of shoes, I just told my father and it would be there. Whenever I wanted to travel, a single word opened the whole world for me to explore. My life then was so easy. Every morning, I didn't rush. I slept in, enjoyed breakfast in bed, and watched my favorite shows on TV for hours. Life was a string of joys. Parties with friends at the finest restaurants, wearing expensive clothes, driving shiny cars that picked me up right at the door. I thought life would always be like that everything would forever be smooth like a rose-strewn path under my feet. I never had to think about hardships, never experienced the feeling of struggling or having to constantly fight for what I wanted. I just enjoyed. But the most dangerous thing about my youth was carefreeness, the blind faith in life's permanence. I thought money would never run out, that this comfort was forever, that my father would always be there to take care of everything. But then, one day, I began to feel a difference. Something shifting deep inside me. My father, the man I had always thought was invincible and tireless, stood before me with a seriousness I had never seen before. No more gentleness, no more easy smiles, just a deep thoughtfulness and a quiet warning that stirred inside me. A warning I had never heard before. My child, life isn't always as easy as you think. There will be days when everything changes, and you have to be ready for that, he said to me. But I just smiled faintly, trying to reassure myself that he was worrying too much, that I had nothing to fear. I didn't realize that his words and his serious gaze were the alarm bells for a new life, a great challenge waiting for me. Everything inside me still flowed like a peaceful river. I was still immersed in fun, long days of doing nothing, days without worry or strain. But behind that shiny curtain was another world, a life I never thought about, never prepared to enter. I hadn't realized that my easy life was just a beautiful dream, a temporary luck I was holding on to. And one day, that dream would end. I had never feared, never thought about facing difficulties or challenges. But soon, it all would come. Maybe that's why my story begins. Not from the glamorous days, but from the moments when I started feeling confused, scared, and sensed that my life wasn't as easy as I thought. I didn't know what I would have to go through, but I knew I couldn't keep living the way I used to. And that was the first step, the very beginning on a challenging path to maturity, which I will share with you. A story about change, effort, and learning to truly take control of life, not just enjoy what others provide. Are you curious about what happened to me next? Do you want to know if I could overcome the difficulties and challenges life threw at me? Join me to explore and listen to the next part of this story. The easy life when young was just the opening chapter, and the real life, that's what I learned day by day, hour by hour. A father's wake-up call. During the days he lived wrapped in the warm embrace of wealth and comfort, he never once had to think too much about the future. Everything was handed to him: money, care, and freedom, which made it easy for him to fall into a state of ease, even complacency. But then, one unexpected day, his father, the man who had built everything for him, looked straight into his eyes with a gaze unlike before. That gaze was no longer the sweet look of a doting father, but the look of a man who had endured countless hardships, carrying the heavy burden of responsibility and life's harsh lessons. His father spoke sternly. "Son, I have worked tirelessly all my life, sacrificing my strength, time, and countless sleepless nights to earn this money. It didn't fall from the sky for you to enjoy. I want you to understand that money isn't everything. What's more important is that you learn to work, to stand on your own 2 feet." His father's words hit him like a powerful blow, waking him from his sweet and carefree dream. He suddenly realized that this comfort could not last forever, and if he continued relying on his father's money, he would always be a dependent, never truly growing up. His father didn't just want him to understand the value of money. He wanted him to realize the responsibility of being a man, to be accountable to himself, to family, and to his own future. "You can't always be the one who inherits," his father continued with a voice full of concern. "Everyone must create their own value. You must learn to work, to face challenges, and even failures. If you keep relying on others, life won't forgive you." These words were a stern warning, but also a deep expression of love, hoping he wouldn't stumble unprepared. He understood that his father didn't just want him to inherit material wealth, but a far more valuable legacy, the spirit of hard work and self-reliance. Inside him, a swirl of emotions began to rise: confusion, fear, but also curiosity and determination. This was no longer a time to indulge, but a time to change, to step out of his comfort zone and face the harsh realities beyond. The coming days might be tough, filled with failures, but he knew that only through this could he truly mature and live a meaningful life. His father's wake-up call was like a light piercing the foggy path ahead, a warning bell telling him life doesn't favor the weak or the dependent. From that moment on, a new journey began, the journey to find true value, to find himself. He started asking himself, do I have the strength to change? Do I have the courage to face challenges? More importantly, do I dare to step out of my great father's shadow and shine on my own? These questions were not only stirring in his mind, but also ignited a burning fire in his heart, pushing him step by step away from comfort toward the real world, where success only comes to those who strive and never give up. Let's continue to the next part, where he begins his arduous journey to rebuild himself. Step out of the past shadow and move toward a bright future with unyielding determination and perseverance. The journey of getting used to work. After that serious and heartfelt conversation with his father, he couldn't forget those words. Words that felt like a key, unlocking a door to a world he'd never truly seen before. His father, with a gaze that was both stern and full of love, decided he could no longer let his son live inside a shell of false comfort. That very day, he took him out of their luxurious home and into the dusty, noisy streets, the place where ordinary people wrestled with life every single second. For the first time, he saw up close the life of regular people, those who didn't share his luck. Right before his eyes were bustling street vendors shouting over one another, the warm scent of fresh bread drifting through the air, the rhythmic noise of daily survival. He saw small, tired shopkeepers who never stopped working from dawn till dusk, each coin earned soaked in sweat and sacrifice, feeding mouths at home. Days off were a luxury they couldn't afford. Giving up was never an option. He watched old tailors with calloused hands, still carefully cutting fabric, stitching thread by thread under the sun, in the cold, despite their aching backs. They didn't live comfortable lives, but carried within them a quiet pride, a sense of dignity in their work, and an unwavering perseverance he had never understood. Each of these moments was like a shock to his system, a vivid, raw portrait of a life shaped by relentless labor. He felt like he was standing between two worlds, one of comfort and ease, and the other of daily struggle for survival. But what struck him the most wasn't just the physical hardship, but the spirit, the determination, the resilience. He realized his life had been nothing more than a fragile bubble built from protection and wealth, while the real world outside was a battlefield where only effort and grit could lead to victory. He felt overwhelmed by a strange mix of fear and curiosity. Could he truly step into that world where laziness and dependence had no place? Did he have what it took to leave his comfort zone behind and learn how to work like these everyday heroes? This was the first turning point in a journey he had never imagined. His father stood beside him, watching silently, with an expression that said, "Life isn't about money handed to you. It's about what you build with your own hands." And at that moment, he understood. It was time to choose his path, to stumble, to get back up, and to truly grow. He had taken the first step, but the road ahead was long, filled with struggles and unknowns. Would he overcome the shadows of laziness and dependence to step into the light of responsibility and self-reliance? Stay tuned for the next part as he begins his hands-on experience with work, faces his first real challenges, and slowly begins to transform, one lesson, one hardship at a time. The first steps into work. After days of witnessing the harsh realities of life outside his privileged bubble, he was no longer the carefree, lazy young man he once was. A strange fire had started to burn inside him, part fear, part curiosity, and part an undeniable desire to try. Then his father, strict yet deeply caring, made a life-changing decision. He would bring his son into the company, but not to sit in an air-conditioned office. No, he would start from the very bottom. No privileges, no favors, no exceptions. That morning, instead of waking to the comfort of luxury or the soft knock of a servant, he rose before dawn. His father was already waiting, not by their usual sleek car, but beside an old delivery truck used by the company to transport goods. The first destination of this new journey wasn't a polished office. It was the warehouse. There, people loaded and unloaded crates, managed inventories, packed boxes, and moved non-stop to meet impossible deadlines. This was where he would begin. He met Mr. William, the warehouse supervisor, a man in his 50s, short in stature but with eyes that told stories of resilience and relentless discipline. Unaware of the young man's background, Mr. Williams simply gave him a nod and handed him a worn-out uniform, a faded t-shirt, heavy-duty pants, and a pair of work gloves. "You'll start here," he said curtly. "You'll follow me for the next 3 months. Around here, there's no boss's son, only people who do the job right and people who don't. You decide which one you'll be." He nodded silently, not out of pride, but humility. For the first time in his life, he truly wanted to prove something, not to his father, not to Mr. William, but to himself. The first day was brutal. The crates were heavy. The air was thick with dust and sweat. Machines roared around him. The rhythm was relentless. By mid-morning, he was drenched in sweat. His hands were raw and his legs trembled. But he didn't complain. Every time he wanted to give up, his father's eyes would flash in his mind. Firm, expectant, unyielding. Mr. William observed quietly. Whenever he made a mistake, the man would simply say, "Do it again. Do it right this time." No yelling, no sugarcoating, just discipline and standards, the kind that made slacking off impossible. By the end of the week, he had begun to adjust. The exhaustion hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defeated him. Instead of frustration, he started to feel pride every time he completed a shipment on time. Instead of dreading early mornings, he started looking forward to the challenge. Slowly, he began to realize work wasn't just about earning money. It was about shaping character. He started noticing those around him, elderly workers with hunched backs who still smiled with pride. Women organizing shelves while softly singing. Mr. William himself, never late, never lazy, always leading by example. None of them lived glamorous lives, but they carried something far more powerful, dignity and inner strength. Each day, he changed a little. He stopped waiting for tasks and began volunteering. He learned how to optimize shelf layouts, how to count inventory with precision, and how to assist newer workers. Though still imperfect, others began to notice something different in him, a spark of growth, a shift in mindset. One evening, as the warehouse emptied, Mr. William handed him a cold drink and sat beside him. "You've improved," he said quietly. "But this is just the beginning. The real test isn't a few good weeks. It's whether you can keep this spirit for a lifetime. Real success doesn't come from bursts of effort, but from a long road of never giving up." Those words hit deep. They were simple, yet powerful, like a gentle hammer striking the very core of his heart. That night, for the first time in years, he opened his laptop not to play games or scroll through social media, but to learn logistics, warehouse systems, communication skills. He wanted to understand it all, not because he had to, but because he truly wanted to be better. And just like that, the boy who once only knew how to spend money was becoming someone who understood the value of sweat, effort, and respect for labor. But this was only the beginning. Ahead of him stretched a long road, full of lessons, failures, and defining moments that would shape the man he would one day become. Does he have the strength to walk this path to the end? Can he truly break free from the shadow of his former self and become someone new, someone better? Stay tuned for the next part of his transformation. Time passed, day by day, and the young man who once lived a life of luxury began to truly change. Waking up early each morning was no longer torture. It had become a habit. Heavy boxes, urgent deliveries, constant reminders from his manager, none of it discouraged him anymore. On the contrary, each task completed on time. Every small word of recognition from others brought him a quiet but deep sense of satisfaction, a happiness he had never experienced before. At first, every step he took was clumsy. He delivered packages to the wrong addresses, miscounted items, packed things incorrectly. Those mistakes made him feel useless. There were moments he considered giving up. But this time, he didn't run away. No longer the impatient boy he once was, he endured, learned from his mistakes, and listened to the workers around him, people he had once seen as invisible. Gradually, he stopped being the spoiled kid dumped into a warehouse for discipline. He became a real part of the team. No one had to remind him anymore. Now he was the one asking, "Anything else I can help with?" Or, "Let me carry that for you." His once soft hands had grown calloused. His once spotless clothes were now stained with sweat and dust. But his eyes gleamed. For the first time in his life, he felt useful. One afternoon, while having lunch with coworkers, an older cleaning lady named Miss Han sat beside him and smiled. "When I first saw you, I thought you'd quit within a week." "Who would have thought you'd end up being even more hardworking than my own son?" Everyone laughed out loud, and he could only chuckle in embarrassment. But deep down, he felt a warm surge of emotion. He realized, nothing feels more meaningful than being acknowledged for genuine effort, not for status, not for money, but for character and action. He didn't just learn work skills. He changed the way he saw life. In the past, he viewed laborers as ordinary people, just surviving from day to day. But now, every story, every smile, every drop of their sweat commanded his respect. They might not have degrees or fame, but they had something he once lacked: perseverance, discipline, and gratitude for life. He began to keep a daily work journal. Each evening, he sat alone in a simple rented room his father had arranged. No air conditioning, no television, no luxuries, just a desk lamp and a small notebook. In it, he wrote, "Day 34. Packed 113 boxes today, 10 more than yesterday. No scolding. People laughed more. I laughed more too." Each page was silent proof of a quiet yet powerful transformation, a quiet rebirth. One day, while helping the team leader audit the warehouse inventory, he noticed a small error in the system, something he would have ignored before. He spoke up and offered a solution, and for the first time, the team leader nodded in approval. Smart thinking. If you're willing to learn the inventory software, you might be team assistant someday. He was stunned. Team assistant? Something he never imagined himself capable of. But now, that future didn't seem so far away. He was no longer the boy he used to be. He had learned to take responsibility, to value perseverance. Most importantly, he had stopped underestimating himself. He called his father. For the first time in months, his voice wasn't full of complaints or frustration. "Dad, thank you for pushing me out of my comfort zone. I understand now why you did it." There was a long silence on the other end, followed by a deep sigh, not one of concern, but of relief. "I believe in you, and I'm proud of you." Those simple words left him speechless. For the first time, he felt he had earned his father's love and trust, not because he was a son by blood, but because he had become someone worthy of it. But the road ahead was still long. Would he be able to keep that fire alive? Would the next challenges make him retreat, or would he rise above and become the man his father always hoped for? The journey of becoming a man was just beginning. And the journey from spoiled child to a person of integrity, was still being written. Will he become a true leader, or will this just be a fleeting turning point in his life? Taking on greater responsibility. That morning, before the sun had fully risen, his father called him into the office. It wasn't the stern voice from the early days, but rather a calm, warm tone. On the desk lay a small key, neatly placed in his father's palm. He looked at his son, not with judgment, but with a strange, glowing sense of trust. "You've done better than I expected," he said. "This is the key to your own office. It's time for you to learn how to run the business, not just work in it." He was stunned. A flood of emotions surged within him: surprise, gratitude, and pressure. He had never imagined being entrusted with such authority. That office was once a place he only passed by when given chores, and now it was his, a modest space, yet filled with immense trust. On his first day inside, he sat silently for a few minutes, looking around the simple room with a desk, folders, a phone, and stacks of invoices. He knew each piece of paper represented a part of the workflow he had never understood before. He began with the basics, learning how to plan deliveries, track expenses, and monitor worker productivity. But the hardest part wasn't the paperwork. It was managing people. He had to lead now. The colleagues he once worked alongside had become the team he was expected to guide. Not everyone accepted the change easily. Some were skeptical. One day, when he offered suggestions to a packing worker about organizing boxes more efficiently, the man responded coldly, "You think being a boss is easy? You've only been working a few months." He said nothing in return. He knew that respect couldn't be demanded through authority. It had to be earned through action and perseverance. He kept learning. After work, instead of heading home to rest, he stayed behind to study reports, asked his father questions he once found boring, read management books, and took detailed notes. One time, he made an error in inventory data, causing a major shipment to be delayed. The entire team had to stay late to fix the mess. He stood in front of them all, bowed his head in apology, and worked harder than anyone until the job was done. The next day, a senior worker quietly told him, "Yesterday, you acted like a real leader." Little by little, he began to understand. Leadership isn't sitting in an air-conditioned office giving orders. It's being accountable, facing problems head-on, and never running away. He learned to listen, to resolve conflict, to keep team morale up during tough times. Most importantly, he learned to believe in himself. Looking back, he was no longer the boy who lived in luxury, detached from reality. Now every step forward bore the mark of sweat and genuine effort. He realized that adulthood is a journey paved not by protection, but by hard work, mistakes, resilience, and growth. One evening, he sat alone in his modest office, simple but tidy, gazing out at the warehouse where he once worked with his hands. He picked up the small key, turned it lightly in his palm, and smiled. What he once saw as a symbol of power had become a symbol of trust and responsibility. Yet, the big question remained. Could he stay on this path? Could he go even further and carry the weight of the entire family business on his shoulders? Or was everything he had done so far merely the beginning of a much longer, more challenging journey? The door had opened, but behind it lay even greater trials. Did he have the strength to keep going? He stood at the edge of the small balcony, looking out over the dimming skyline, where factory chimneys exhaled tired smoke into the amber-stained sky. Below, workers were leaving for the day, some with heavy shoulders, others with a quiet sense of pride. The clanging of tools, the murmur of tired footsteps, the distant laughter of children waiting for their parents, all of it felt like music to his soul now. Because unlike before, he understood what it meant. He had become part of this rhythm, and for the first time, he didn't feel above it. He felt alive within it. Just months ago, he was someone else entirely. A boy wrapped in comfort, lost in ease. He lived in a world where nothing had to be earned. Everything, from clothes and cars to choices and chances, was handed to him on a silver platter by a father who had spent decades building a fortune with blood and bone. But the boy had never seen the story behind the wealth, He had only known the results, never the process, until it all changed. It started with a conversation. One evening, his father, usually gentle and distant, sat him down and spoke with a kind of intensity the boy had never seen before. "You are living a borrowed life," his father said. "The money you use isn't yours, it's mine, and I earned it through pain you've never imagined. You must learn how to create, not just consume." That night didn't end with a fight or slamming doors. It ended with a strange silence, the kind that signals the end of one era and the uncertain beginning of another. The very next morning, his father took him to the city, not to show him property or introduce him to business partners, but to the underbelly of life, the warehouses, the tailoring shops, the street stalls, the loading docks, places where no one had titles, but everyone had purpose. There, the boy watched men lift crates heavier than himself without complaint. He watched women, their backs bent but spirits unbroken, stitching clothes from sunrise to dusk. He listened to jokes exchanged over simple lunches, heard stories of sleepless nights and sacrifices made for children, and he saw something he had never noticed before: dignity in struggle, strength in silence, meaning in work. He had never felt shame for his privilege until then, not because he was guilty of being born into wealth, but because he had never truly respected what it took to build it. Now, every time he tried to rest his hands in his pockets, he was reminded of the calluses he didn't yet have. That week, his father gave him a choice: stay or go home. The boy stayed. What followed was a transformation few could see coming. From unloading trucks at dawn to sweeping shop floors at night, he began to do things no one thought he could or would. He burned through failures quickly, misplacing orders, breaking tools, misunderstanding tasks. But day by day, he got better, stronger, more focused, and strangely, happier. There was a strange fulfillment in finishing a hard day's work with nothing but sweat and a clear conscience. And for the first time, he began to sleep well, not out of exhaustion, but out of peace. But the greatest lesson wasn't in the work itself. It was in what the work revealed. He realized he had always associated success with lifestyle, cars, status, reputation. But now, success meant something entirely different: the ability to contribute, the ability to stand up and say, "I built this." Whether it was a business, a meal, a moment of kindness, it didn't matter. The pride wasn't in the outcome. It was in the effort. He also began to see his father differently, not just as a provider, but as a man who carried pain he never spoke of. Late one night, after finishing a delivery run, he returned home and found his father still awake. They didn't say much, just sat on the back porch, drinking tea, watching the moon climb. Then, quietly, the boy said, "Thank you for not letting me waste my life." His father didn't respond with words, just a soft nod and a smile that said more than any speech ever could. What this young man learned during those weeks can't be taught in school or found in books. It was the type of learning only life could give, raw, unfiltered, and unforgettable. He had started out thinking the world owed him something. Now, he realized he owed the world something instead: his time, his talent, his effort. And this is where the story turns outward. Because this story isn't just about one boy, it's about all of us. Anyone who's ever felt lost, entitled, or unsure of where to begin. Maybe you were protected too long, maybe you've coasted on comfort, maybe no one's ever challenged you to do more than just exist. But if this boy could wake up to a new life, so can you. You don't need to wait for a crisis. You don't need someone to drag you to a warehouse. All you need is a decision. To live your life as a creator, not a consumer. To build, to try, to fail forward. Your past does not define you. Your choices do. And every day you have a choice to step into the person you were meant to be. So stand up. Start small. Take that first uncomfortable step. It may be messy, awkward, painful, but I promise you it will be real. And real is where the good stuff lives. If this story touched something inside you, please like, share, and subscribe to Kunzy Podcast English. We tell stories that remind you of what matters. Stories that wake you up. Stories that push you toward your potential. Your journey might just be the next one we tell. And remember, the life you want won't come from waiting. It will come from working for it.